Alright, we should be live. Okay. So I'm just going to watch the top 8 matches and see what I can do better. The first one is versus obviously a very good player. Magic Online in boss. So, I guess there's something somewhat interesting on the first turn about which land I'm going to play. I have these two. Just played the, yes, I can hold this one to cycle, but my hand really looks like it's going to need the lands, and I have 3 Rootbound Crags I can draw that would maybe, potentially make me just want to play that. So I think it's, pretty clear to do that, but a little unintuitive because it seems better to hold this one in your hand. Yeah, didn't leave up Censor on turn 2. I guess that's a more interesting play. I think I needed to develop my double colored sources because I have 2 spells I wouldn't be able to cast, like Curse Pile and Izzet Charm there. Yeah. I think there's maybe an argument for just Izzet Charming the West Rider, but I wanted to find lands. Yeah, so I cycled Shark Typhoon because I would have to hit multiple lands in a row off the top for the Growth Spiral to be a better play than trying to cycle 2 cards to find a land. I'm able to find the land to play Reclamation, which is good. Here, I think I Mystical Disputed this. It's going to be way too much damage, I think, to just let another Cutthroat go through. But it's pretty easy to go over the top of them, and so if you can survive, that's pretty good. I can kind of safely fire off a Dispute because I have this Izzet Charm to counter Bolas' Citadel. So that's that. I guess they attacked if they made a food here, when land. So this should tell me they don't have Citadel, I guess. Or maybe they just don't care about playing around Izzet Charm, sure. Even if they had it. But. It's pretty clear that they don't have Citadel in their hand, because otherwise I think they would have made a food. But pretty straightforward play for me. All my spells are instant, so it's just better to play a Wreck. It's just more mana. I think I have Chemisters inside here. Yeah, and I'm able to, I have these Izzet Charms to kill their creatures, which is good. But once you get their pressure off and you have, Reclamations, they don't really have any way to interact with your Expansion Explosions or O's. So as long as you can keep their board kind of clear, it's pretty free. Yeah, I go to 5 here. And I didn't tap out on Instep. They scryed to the top at one point. I should. Is it not showing the game log? It's not showing the game log. That's fine. But I'm pretty sure they scryed to the top, which led me to want to leave up the Izzet Charm because they just passed with a bunch of mana and they had scryed something to the top. I think regardless of this card, I probably make the same play. I'm pretty far ahead. I have so much mana that I can afford to be a little inefficient on my turn to guarantee I counter this Collected Company. And I do get to do that. Growth Spiral. Yeah. Chemister's Insight, discard arrow. And I passed. I was like a little worried about a top deck Citadel. And I figured I can always, like, there's no draw that really punishes me for taking that damage there. I don't think they have a lethal play. And I know I'm going to get to Uro. Just good. I could take this Blast Zone out too. Yeah. Put in the island so I can counter and Blast Zone there. I don't know, I maybe should have done a Shockland. I didn't do the math on. I think I could have played a tapped Shockland probably. But yeah, put 2 counters on it because there's a chance I want to kill it. And like I have enough cards in my graveyard, I'm gonna have 5 if I crack the Blast Zone, that I can kill my own Uro and still get a trigger next turn if I need to get a trigger. Yeah. And so this sets me up to go attack with Uro, get a trigger, crack my Blast Zone to kill their 2 creatures, and then get another Uro trigger. Which basically beats everything that's not Citadel. They did actually concede here, which I thought was interesting. Because my hand didn't actually do anything, but I was going to get another Uro trigger, I was going to cycle this, and I guess they would have had to top deck something. I don't know, that game felt pretty straightforward. It's probably one of the less interesting matches, but let's watch game 2. Obviously this hand's insane. Anger of the Gods is like very good in the matchup. My mana is actually pretty weird with this hand, and that's probably like the main thing I wasn't sure about with this game is how I sequenced the beginning. Because I want to cast my Growth Spiral on turn 2, but I also want to make sure I have triple red. So I believe I read. Yeah, I let on Rootbound Crag, which means I like, if I wanted to cycle Sensor turn 1 I couldn't, but it does mean I think playing the Rootbound Crag was the best because I get to guarantee a turn 2 Growth Spiral and a turn 3 Anger, and that's like the only thing that does that, so I think that was pretty clear, but I don't know, somewhat interesting. Yeah, oh yeah, so here's pretty... something I'm pretty free to fire off the Growth Spiral here since I didn't play a 3rd land, and I think their play is correct. The Collected Company in response there, they lose to Anger, but they know I have Censors in my deck, and I have like 2 mana up that I took down. So unfortunately for them, they just like had to play into an Anger based on the way the game went, and then pretty much just win. So that game also wasn't particularly interesting. I think the games get better. This is one of the better games. I made a pretty bad mistake in this one, I think. It's quite a long game versus Mono Red, which is always interesting because usually you get to a stage of the game where either like the Reclamation deck is dead or they put an Uro into play and they win. But yeah, okay. So I did keep this hand. I knew what my opponent was on. I know my opponent is on a mono red Torbrand deck. It has some amount of burn spells, but not a lot. And it plays like 4 Swiss Spears, 4 Soul Scars as 1-drops. I played them in the Swiss and I saw like Tari Zev and stuff. So it's like kind of a lower to the ground aggro deck, but not quite burn. And I kept this hand. Normally you don't draw 2, discard 2 with Izzet-Charm because you need to keep all of your lands. But my thinking is that Uro is very powerful in this matchup. It's one of the cards I want to see the most. And I can Izzet-Charm, discard Uro and a card, and that gives me a bunch of cards for Uro early on in the game, and a pretty reasonable chance if I hit green sources to do something good. And game one, the only thing I have that's like other than a quick Uro draw is Anger of the Gods, and I think it's like reasonable to mulligan trying to find Anger, but like you can sort of see how this hand pays off, right? You get like a couple draw steps plus the Is It charm, not countering the Lightning Strike pretty obviously. They have a lot of 3-drops in their deck that are good. And yeah, I was paid off because I found a green source, and it means I have all these cards that let me get stuff into my graveyard, and I can Growth Spiral into Censor Bone Crusher Giant, which is pretty powerful. So, unfortunately, I didn't find a way to escape Uro, which might have been a different mistake. At some point, I think I was like, I could like cycle that. I don't know. Yeah, but I didn't. But I had the Mystical Dispute, which means I can cycle Uro. And I escape an Uro on turn 5 with a Wreck Out, and all they have is the Soul Scar, and I have a Blast Zone. So I'm massively far ahead, but I do, and surprisingly, almost lose this game. I'm going to leave the Blast Zone on 1 for as long as I can. I want to be able... Soul Scar can put counters on an Uro, and it's like a way for them to remove counters with Uro over time. And so I figured, like, it's fine to leave it on 1 to counteract Soul Scar. And it's so easy for me to charge it up with the amount of mana I have, that I'd prefer the flexibility. So I scry here, put 2 lands on bottom. They play a Karizev, and at the end of next turn is probably the worst mistake I made. It's interesting. They did have a chance there to fire off a burn spell on it if they wanted, but... Yeah, so at the end of turn here, I believe I scry at the bottom, and then I float 4 mana with the Blast Zone, but I should have floated 3, left up my Blast Zone activation. It was something I'd like planned. I had been trying to like think about leaving Blast Zone on 1, and I tapped my Blast Zone. The mana wasn't useful at all, and I get my Uro Lightning Strike for 3 counters. Which is really bad, because here they get to play Chandra. And normally Chandra wouldn't be able to tick down on my Uro, and I missed pretty hard, and they just get to kill my Uro. So the Blast Zone play was pretty bad. I see more lands, scry those to the bottom. Notably leaving my Blast Zone there. At this point I don't care about the Soul Scar, and I'd rather kill Karizev. Miss a scry, more on the bottom. Do hit another land, which kind of sucks, but it should be fine. I'm bound to hit something at some point with the castle, but yeah. So you can see how like I lost that Uro there and just ran into kind of a bad series of draws, and it almost cost me this game. It was a pretty poor choice by me. Because the mana that I floated didn't matter, it was just no upside. And finally find an Expansion Explosion. And so here, I believe, Explosion the Goblin Chain Whirler. At this point, I'm going to win if I Explosion for a decent amount. If I don't die here, I'm going to win. And Chandra represents 2 damage. With some potential of plussing into something that does more than 2 damage. But I think on average, I just need to reduce the amount of damage I'm going to take. And if I hit nothing, that's like... I need to make sure I have the least potential to take damage. I left at 5 mana. I wasn't quite sure about this. Figured like, I hit like Mystical Dispute plus Is It Charm or something, or like Growth Spiral into X, or I might cycle a couple times. I actually think I should have done it for a little more, Post board, if I had like Scorching Dragonfires that I could combine, it would be good. Yeah, so but I hit Sharks, and at this point I would die to a Lightning Strike, but they only have Bone Crusher Giant, and it becomes fairly easy to win from here. I just like Uro, escape Uro. I'm at a trillion life. Yeah, I can even just Anger of the Gods because I'm so many resources. Yeah. So like, here I may just think a big Shark Deep and need a Vault. Don't want to lose my Uro because that seems like an easier way to lose. Yeah, anyway. So, the game was closer than it needed to be. Obviously, I like bricked a million turns on Castle. But taking down the Blast Zone was pretty bad. I'm not sure how the rest of the game was very interesting. I did want to showcase that play though, because it's like pretty interesting. Just like normally when you're tapping mana, you can't actually like get blown out because it's like something you can undo. Like if you tap your Blast Zone, you can do it. But like with the trigger on the stack, like trying to float it in response, you do actually take down that activation by tapping the Blast Zone and waiting for it to untap. And that was just not great. That's the game 2 here. If anyone sees anything somewhat interesting, let me know, or has a comment on the quality of the stream. Okay, so yeah, again, I kept this hand. There was no red mana, but I returned to Growth Spiral. I can censor a 3-drop or a 4-drop because they do kind of have to curve out. They're not a red deck that can easily sequence around censor. And if I find a red source, I'll be able to clean up some early threats. So it's just another hand I kept like under the assumption that it's like kind of easy to get there, or like a reasonable chance of just like having a really broken draw. But did I always have the red source? When did I draw the mountain? I think I drew them. Hold on. I'm gonna restart that quick. Just want to see when I drew the mountain. Did I always have that? Because I didn't remember having a mountain in my opening hand. Yeah, I didn't. Cool. So we'll just walk through this quick again. Yeah, I drew the mountain on turn 1. Okay. It was blocked by my mic, which is why I didn't see it. So I had the option to play turn 1 Magma Spray, but they didn't play a 1-drop, and their 2-drop is Karizev, so just leaving up Magma Spray doesn't make a lot of sense when I want to be able to Growth Spiral into the mountain. Here I did think I make a mistake. So I Growth Spiral. And I hit Anger, and I was going to put in the mountain. I Growth Spiral and I decided not to Magma Spray, and this play's interesting. There's like some amount of merit to it, because if I had a red source, I get to save a Magma Spray, and I'm not particularly likely, like with the way my draw looks, it's not like I need that mana on this. So my next turn is probably going to be either Censor something or Cycle Censor. But what could happen is they could have like a 1-mana instant spell, but that'd be Wild Slash, and I'd assume they boarded it out. So felt correct to me. Yeah, here I play Tapping Pool. Magma Spray the Soul Scar while they only have 1 mana, because they're very unlikely to have anything that does hit post board there. They don't do anything, and I don't use the cycle the censor, because it means I'm not under a ton of pressure from this Karizev, and I can censor a 3-drop. And then here I obviously just play Gargaroth. Pretty fortunate to hit the Gargaroths there, and the game ends. Basically. Yeah, Gargaroth very strong. It's one of the best sideboard cards. It wins a lot of games on its own. This is the final match and probably the most interesting one I played in the top 8. It's a Temur Reclamation Mirror. I played them in the Swiss. The only notable thing is that I'm all in the first hand, just not enough action. Yeah, and again, here's like a situation where I can like decide to play. I think I should play the Bivouac, I think. Yeah, because in this case, if I draw a check land, I get a shock anyway. Yeah. Game one's awkward. They just have like a really quick draw. I don't really get to do anything. Oh sure. It's like possible that I'm not supposed to play the Reading Pool on turn 2. I'm supposed to play another tapped land. It's like pretty possible I'm just supposed to play a tapped land on turn 2. Unless I think I left mana up to counter Rec. No, that makes sense. I don't want to get reclamationed. Sure. Slow this down a little. Yeah, and I go to counter Rec here and I get disputed. So like pretty disastrous start to a game. So okay, I think I messed this part of the game up a little bit. I'm thinking that I'm under too much pressure to just like pay patiently and cycle these Shark Typhoons. But they only have 3 cards, and I think if I just try and hit land drops and like with these, and then like maybe put an Uro into play, it's better. Like I just get like I just time walk myself for 2 turns. They do find another island to start scrying. Yeah, and I just get like time walked for multiple turns, and I think I gave them too much of an opportunity to. Interesting that they took the Blast Temp to 4. I think they would want to leave it on 3 because of Uro, and they already have a Wreck, and I don't. But I don't like how I think there's like pretty decent merit to just cycling Shark Typhoons, so they're not able to get like time locked while they're scrying every turn. And it took me a while to hit land drops because I didn't cycle those, and I got like ridiculously far behind. Also notably, in the post-board games, when your opponent has a lot of lands in a reclamation, there is no way to counter an expansion explosion. There's only disputes and Izzet Charms and Censors. And so if they do get to develop their lands with their reclamation out and they find an expansion explosion, it will resolve game 1. Except for, I do actually know my opponent has 1 neutralized. I played them earlier and I saw them play versus a streamer that I was watching during the tournament. I don't know where if it was in the sideboard or this. I only saw it in the sideboard game. But it is something to keep in mind that they have. If they play like they obviously have a hard counter, they probably do, because I did see that in a previous match, I think. But yeah. And then here, like I get to escape my Uro, but it's pretty much too late. They find, I believe they top this turn. But like I said, I think if I cycle these Sharks there, I'm at least somewhat attacking them, and they don't get to use their counters, like their Censors and the Mystical Disputes. Like I effectively did nothing for 2 turns while they were developing Scries. The game does actually end up somewhat interesting, but I'm just too far behind. I'm just too I don't there's a lot of upside to jamming, and I was pretty far behind, so it's like somewhat reasonable. But the only scenario that they don't have a counter spell is either their hands like mostly lands, which wouldn't make sense because they didn't have double blue, so I don't think they're on mostly lands based on that situation. And I also or they have expansion explosions, and I'm not beating expansion explosion, I think, from that position, even if I play a reclamation. And so I think I'm supposed to the thing that makes the most sense for me to try and beat is to try and beat a hand of counter spells, or these conditional counter spells, because I'm not beating expansion explosion. I'm too far behind to do that. Based on the way the game had played, they're not a hand of all lands. And so I think actually cycling these Shark Typhoons was maybe the best case of beating what the hand they might have had. So that was interesting in this game at least. And here I'm just obviously very far behind. They had so much mana. They make an 8/8 Shark. I mean, I get to make a shark here, but it's a 6/6 and they have an 8/8. Um, like I did start to draw good cards, but at this point, like without a reclamation, it's just pretty hard. I pass and I think I make another shark. My intention, my intention at this stage in the game is that if they attack me, it's like reasonable. I get to double block. I do actually think this might have been a mistake. I think I could have potentially taken 8 damage, especially with an Uro in my graveyard and already being at 24. I think there's like a chance like I just want to like flash in a shark on instep, try and attack you for 13, um, and then have this expansion explosion that if you like scry my instep, I can dome you with. So I do actually think it's a potential mistake for me there. I think attacking them would have been really solid. But as you can see, if the hit gets through, they didn't do anything. And so I think that's actually a mistake. Like I think I could have, my best chance of coming back in the game was to cycle the. I didn't expect Aether Gust main deck. I don't think that's some earlier lists had it, but I don't know if it's particularly stock. I think I dispute this. This dispute's pretty dead. Getting rid of 2 cards is like a reasonable shot of doing anything. Play another rack. I think I die here. Maybe. Maybe they scry. But they get to expansion my shark there. I think if I had been able to just put them to 5 and pass with my shark, that might have been like the best chance of letting me win. Here I think they make giant shark. I try and like explosion it, and I get like disputed. Huh. Maybe I should have done something there. Like maybe I could have explosion them for some amount. I think I'm thinking my best shot is to deck them with an explosion. Or like hope they make a mistake. So like here they go for an explosion and I just start like they start tapping their mana and casting spells and I just like try and take as many game actions as possible that would make them forget their explosion. So like with this Wilderness Reclamation trigger on the stack, I go like explosion for 6, get it Mystical Disputed, copy the Mystical Dispute, mostly just to make them click buttons and hope they would mess up with their own explosion when they targeted me for 18. But they didn't, so we can get out of this game. Keep kind of a landlight hand. I think it was fine. It's rough, but like I have Growth Spiral on the play. It's a lot of upside. Like you can really pull yourself far ahead with Mystical Dispute, press Growth Spiral. Like here, if they had Growth Spiral, I just get to counter it, which is just like insane. I think they did. I think I censored, or either Aether Gusted or I used Dispute. That makes the most sense. I want Censored to be able to hit my own land drops. And Gust is a better late game card, so I disputed. Cycling first there, just to give myself a higher chance of hitting a land. It does play into Censor, but like, I'm just not that likely to hit a land off of Growth Spiral if I cast it before Censor. And both net me a card, so that's fine. So I'm able to end up pretty far ahead on mana here. I don't have a lot to do with it. Did an Aether Gust or Growth Spiral with another Aether Gust is a card that like countering the wreck with it's usually pretty good, but it doesn't hit a ton in the matchup, and I didn't want to like get in a spot where they were pulling ahead with spells that this doesn't hit, so I wanted to use one. Chemister is a good draw there. Card's like pretty great in the mirror, I think. Put a counter on Blast Zone here. There's nothing in the matchup at CMC's like 1-2 that I care about Blast Zoning. Okay, I guess this decision's interesting. I didn't Reclamation. I don't think I have to. Just like, I have a Chemist's Insight. I have something of an advantage. If I go like, I can't like fight over my wreck really. But they do get to make a 4 Forge Dark. I'm like not feeling great about my spot, but it did come together in the end. What did I pick? I think I pitched Growth Spiral here. Growth Spiral first, right? And then I pitched Aether Gust to this Chemist's Insight. I can see an argument for just not inciting. Gust is a fine card, but it's decent. And I get to Wilderness Reclamation here. Now because I have like slightly more things, like even if they like Aether Gust and Wilderness Reclamation in this scenario, I just put it on top. I pass, and if they do anything scary, I have Negate. And worst case scenario, I can copy in Negate or something in a counter war. So this obviously works out fantastically. Think I make a Shark here? Yeah, make a 6/6 Shark. Leaving up like Negate, Scries, potential double Negate. Although I really don't want to use an expansion at this point. Yeah, Sky 2. The best thing they can do here is like instant speed expansion explosion for 4, but like at that point that means they're tapping out, and I have expansion explosion. So like, yeah, pretty happy. Like I drew pretty well this game after I accelerated early, which is like pretty powerful because it opens you up to getting good draws, and I countered their acceleration and stuff, which meant it worked out. I don't know if it was correct, but like I think at one point I was maybe not favored to win this game. I don't know their hand, but it didn't feel great about it. I get to explosion for 8, leaving counter plus pay for a Mystical Dispute and Censor combined. So like really just no way that's not resolving most of the time. And 8, I figured 8 would be enough to like. I didn't think the difference between 8 and 9 was big enough to matter. And I just get to like make another. I just pretty clearly win this game, right? I have everything. Yeah, and they go for a Shark, which means I get lethal, so I could also I notably didn't Cyclonic Rift it here. Cyclonic Rifting would save me time on the clock, but I didn't want to show it to them for game 3. It's not super stock, so even though it's in some lists. So and then the final game. I have a reasonable hand. Hey, somehow the chat finally popped up. It wasn't for the other games, but now we can see the game log, which is good with Castle of Androscries. This one's interesting. I have like a reasonably mediocre opening hand. My lands don't really come into play. Like I don't have a lot of lands. I don't have a Growth Spiral, but I do hate mulliganing in this matchup because more often than not, with the London Mulligan. Decks that are better with the Linden Mulligan are decks that can put back lands a lot of the time, in my mind. Here I had an interesting decision. I just got another island. I think I could play Rupine Craig tapped, and that would be like not the end of the world. I think I censor this, which is not good in the sense that it means that I'm missing land drops, but I could miss a land drop. I think I don't cycle the Shark Typhoon. Which I'm unsure about too. Obviously pretty punished by drawing another one, but do this. I expansion a Chemist's Insight, which works out pretty well for me, because I need the lands. And yeah, so like I did miss a land drop for that turn, but like being to have double Shark Typhoon to put them under pressure like works out pretty well when they didn't have their own sharks. And even if they did, I do have an answer to a shark. I think they make one here, yeah. I'm not sure how I navigated the early game there. I like countered an Uro with the dispute, which I think was fine, just like not letting them get too far ahead. I'm not sure about not cycling Shark Typhoon for 0 there. Yeah. You get 3/3 on tap. And here I go for no, I go for Uro. Sure. I think going for Uro here is fine. It lets me leave up a bunch of counter spells still. And also, like, develop my mana slash. I didn't attack into another shark there. I thought that'd be pretty disastrous. We got to dispute Chemistry's Insight, which is obviously very good. Like, yeah, disputes are really, like, at the stage of the game start to get worse. It's, like, pretty reasonable to stop. But, yeah. Didn't Cyclonic Rift it. I did want to keep up a counter spell for Expansion Explosion. And I escape an Uro here. I don't know if this is, like, a great play. It takes out, like, a reasonable percent of mana. It's possible I could go for Reclamation. But I just, like, with Negate, it's, like, such a good hard counter, too. That, like, I don't feel like I'm going to get Wreck Explosion. I can get an Uro onto the battlefield and push an advantage. I can really see that play being incorrect, though. I'm obviously just going to use my stuff on the inside. Nothing, like, super big. Not Cyclonic Rifting the Shark. I'm, like, somewhat scared of a bigger shark. Okay, hold on. I escaped the Uro on that turn, the last turn. I think what I was thinking with escaping the Uro instead of jamming something is the way I get punished is Wreck Explosion. And if they go Reclamation, on their second main phase, they can bounce it with Cyclonic Rift. And they would have to have, like, Reclamation, counter my Cyclonic Rift, Expansion Explosion, and then have something for my Negate. Which seemed like a reasonable upside, but I could see not playing it there. Here I just like this. I'm very far ahead. I have a Shark Typhoon, and I just damned a Reclamation. I'm like, I'm gonna win the tournament. I wanna win. And I think this worked out pretty poorly for me. I'm still in a good spot after this happens, but like, I spend a lot of negates and stuff just to like lose my Reclamation, and a bunch of mana, and I'm stuck here with 3 mana. And if they have Expansion, Explosion, and Reclamation, like, and an answer to my Cyclonic Rift, I guess, it's, like, not good for me. And they get to escape an Uro, so I didn't love what I did there. I think it was too aggressive. I think cycling a giant shark would have been pretty good shot of just locking up the game. I get to, like, then they have to answer my stuff, and then I get to jam Reclamation because they have to answer my stuff. Not Ether Gusting here because I really only care about Expansion Explosion. And this is the point where I realized I won, which was cool. Because, like, there's just nothing they can have. I don't know if I need Cyclonic Rift the Uro, like... Oh, sorry, Aether Gust the Uro. It's, like, pretty nice to answer Reclamation with that, but... Yeah, the Explosion, I have a dispute, and that's pretty much that, which is good. So, I don't know how I played. The Wreck Mirror is, like, pretty interesting. I don't love some of the aggressive lines I took that game. I don't think I love not cycling the Shark Typhoon for 0 there. I think the previous game... yeah, I think the main things are, like, game 1, I think I would have, like, back-to-back cycled Sharks instead of, like, trying to back-to-back slam Rex. I think that was just, like, a misevaluation of what I could beat and what their hand could be. I think I played this game too aggressively. I, like, jammed a couple times where it might not have been great. But yeah, that's the final thing. I guess I can, like, I'm already streaming. I can talk about the deck because I have, like, 7 viewers, which is more than normal viewers. So, I'll do that. So I'll just, like, show what I played in the challenge and show what I would play in the future with Temur. I don't actually think Temur is the best Reclamation deck in Pioneer. I think that's something else we can talk about. This is what I played. I played a Frontier Bivouac over a Castle of Antris. I just got a lance. I'm not sure what I cut. I think it was 2 Fabled Passage. Or not. I'm playing 3 Fabled Passage. Oh, 2 Islands, sure. I played a Frontier Bivouac over at Castle Vantress. I think I played 3 Castle Vantress. It's just like really powerful to have one. There's a lot of games where like if I didn't have one, I think I'd lose. And I think the mana was good enough that I didn't need it. I did appreciate it sometimes. I think with like Anger of the Gods. I think the other thing is it's fine to have one of these main deck over a single Izzet Charm. Like both of these are like pretty reasonable and flexible effects of interaction to have. But I dislike drawing multiples of either of them. Like, Izzet Charm, the draw mode is just really not something you can do a lot of the time, unless you're like discarding like Anger and Uro versus a deck that's like those are bad against. But I'd actually find it to be like a Shock Spell Pierce split card to be like pretty decent, even if you're not using the looting a lot. I think in the future, let's see, in the sideboard, I want a Niv Mizzet, and another, I think a 4th Shark Typhoon and Niv Mizzet is going to be, I think those are going to be better in the control matchups than Narset is. I think, I think I don't need 3 Magma Sprays and 2 Dragonfires. It's hard to find enough room to board all these in versus the aggro decks. And the Gargaroths do a lot, anyway. This leaves me with 14 cards. I originally had a 2nd Cyclonic Rift. But I didn't love... I'm saying I'm not, but... I didn't love the 2nd Rift. I think it's pretty bad to draw multiples of. I think it's an effect you really want one of in your 75 as something to get you up. I'm not sure about Ambushers. They're like a fine card. But with I think they're much closer to a standard level. I think Ambusher is much closer to a standard level power card than a Pioneer one. I think like the way the decks function in Pioneer, Ambusher just isn't as good of a threat. There's more removal. It's not good versus a lot of decks, in my opinion. Like Jund Citadel, a lot of things punish it. I think Shark Typhoons as your flash effects are like pretty good on their own. Oh yeah, I think I might play a Neutralize in the main deck over Mystical Disputes. Quantities. I think I'd also play this over Mystical Dispute. One of these. I wanted a hard counter in the main deck. There were a lot of spots where I get into matchups, and I'd have like Mystical Disputes are great. They're like very cheap, obviously, in the right match. A lot of matchups, Mana Leak is good enough at 3 mana Mana Leak. It's fine, and it really excels at beating Teferis. But I just found that the games would go long, and like you'd have these Mystical Disputes, and they'd start resolving Teferis, and it was really awful. I didn't even see a main deck negate. Like that card's pretty reasonably positioned in Pioneer right now. But I think I cut something on accident. What did I cut? I think it was a Shark Typhoon. But so I could see this being a better main deck. And then in the sideboard, probably just another creature. I think like the spell mix. It was pretty hard to I feel the core of the deck is just so strong. It was really hard for me to want to change what I had going on the deck. One thing I will say is I don't actually think Temur is the best version of Reclamation and Pioneer. This is what I played because it's like the thing I had a list built for in the challenge. When I think about it, I think Bant is just a better deck. You have Sphinx's Revelation instead of Expansion Explosion, which costing 1 less on your expensive Magic card is very, very important. The mana there is like pretty hard to understate. You have to play Dovin's Vetoes, which I assume the Reclamation deck it won both challenges this weekend. And it was in the it was a mirror match in the finals of one of them. Like you get Dovin's Vetoes, and Dovin's Veto is probably the best card in the format versus this deck. You get to guarantee to counter this. And you play Azorius Charms, which like are pretty decent against a lot of the decks. Like, these probably become like two Azorius charms. You could put like, Absorb, which is probably more reasonable. Sideboard like the Fairy Time Raveler for the mirror. I don't think like Bant's like that much of a different deck than Temur. I think just you get to play like Sphinx's Revelation. Could have a card on accident. I keep doing that. What was it? Whatever. It's fine. I'm not gonna like talk about the deck too much longer. I think like Skinny play Sphinx's Revelation. You lose out an Anger. Anger was really really good for me. But Verdict's not awful. But you don't get the Anger into Wreck curve, which is pretty busted. But I think like there's just a misidentification about what X spell was the best. I think Rev is just gonna be better. So that's that on the deck. There's not a ton other I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to record the matches that I thought were interesting enough. So I could have something to like think about. So I'm I don't think it was anything else I feel like talking about. Yeah, that's about it. Just wanted to like throw some matches with the deck. It's very strong. I obviously won the challenge, which was good. But I don't think I'd play Temur. I don't know exactly what the best Bant list looks like. And one of them is from like a Patreon thing, so I'm not going to showcase that. But I will just say that like if you're going to play this deck, I would heavily look into a Bant version of Sphinx's Revelation. It's just like seems much more logical. This card is just not insane. It's just not a great card. It's 4 mana is a lot of mana when you don't have a wreck, which means it's just not. It's worse post board games when people have more answers to. The copy effect's nice, but it's just not. I just think like the extra card you get from Rev, Life Gain being like a pretty reasonable way to attack this deck. I think is a burn deck with Skullcracks. I think the aggro decks get beat pretty easily by it with Anger of the Gods and Gargaroth. But I think the lowest burn decks that are much lower to the ground, like Uro, gaining 3 life isn't going to cut it versus aggro. Like a burn deck, like that deck. I think you need to gain a little more than 3. All of your disputes main deck are bad. Your sensors are easily sequenced around. Unlike the chunkier versus Torbrand, like Sensor is amazing versus that deck. They try and curve into a Rabble Master and you Sensor. It's insane. And they also have like plans for when you flood on Aether Gust and Magma Sprays post board. And they get to play Skullcrack, which can buy them like Skullcracking and Uro, pretty solid. Because I'm spending a lot of mana to do not a lot if it gets Skullcracked against an aggro deck. So I think a deck that would attack this is Lurrus Burn, and playing Bant gives you Sphinx's Revelation, which I think I've talked about enough. Like being able to fire the thing off for 2 with 5 mana is so much better than what Explosion does. And I think you just get a better sideboard as well. I don't think these like red burn spells are particularly necessary. I won almost all my matches versus aggro through Gargaroth. I think you could easily just play through Gargaroth and Supreme Verdicts and do fine versus aggro. Yeah, so that's kind of like all I had to say. I just wanted to go through my matches. I wanted to go through how I felt the deck was, like how I would build Temur, and if someone wanted to play Temur, and probably just talk about Bant. So I'm going to end it. Thanks for watching. It's probably one of the higher viewed streams I've ever had. So that's pretty good to see. I guess winning gives you, I don't know how this deck got on the screen, but I guess winning gives you clout, which is great. Alright, see you next time.